Hello and welcome to Duality. I'm your host, Ash, and today we are getting into all things about the moon. I was reflecting yesterday and having a conversation with my good friend, and I was just like, yo, like, I never made a podcast about the moon. So, what better time than the beginning of Cancer season to get into all meanings of the moon? So I want to start off by saying shout out to my friend Danny for creating this beautiful art piece and carrying that moon medicine in a big way and, being a mirror of that. And that's kind of like what the moon is in general. Like when we think of the moon as a energy, if we think about it on a scientific level, right, the moon controls the tides and the tides are water, right? And then we think about it and we are 70% water or something like that. And how can we expect ourselves not to be moved by the moon? How can we expect ourselves, if it's literally moving huge bodies of water on the earth, like why do we think that the earth, on a scientific level, nonetheless spiritual, how can we even comprehend or like accept that the moon doesn't have an effect on us? Now, there's also studies. I know from like personal studies, my mother has worked in labor and delivery and all things womb related as a registered nurse for over 20. Well, she became a nurse when I was born, while I was still in her belly. So like 26 years, going on 27. And yeah, she always said, as soon as the full moon happens, everyone's popping out babies. And I'm like, I always thought that was weird. Like, I always remember her saying that, being like, interesting. And then you notice, like, crime rate goes up when the full moon usually happens and, like, certain astrological events that happen. But, today we're focusing on the moon, so we're going to give her space. So, the full moon, so how it was told to me back in the day, the whole aspect of the full moon as opposed to the new moon is that the full moon was all about letting go of things. Also, on a very primal level, the full moon was about ovulation. And if the women's wombs were synced with the earth, essentially, you were bleeding during the new moon, which was the introspective time. You can't see the moon in the sky, so it's all dark, and then you kind of have that opportunity to go within yourself and listen, have your inner guidance. It said that, in indigenous ways, that we're on kind of like the brink of life and death. And when we're on that brink of life and death, there's a portal that we're opening, just like when we're giving birth. Like, it's kind of opposite of giving birth because we're destroying, right? We're shedding our uterine lining on a very, like, literal note. We are shedding skin. Like, we are creating space for new eggs to come in to potentially be fertilized and carried and created into new life, right? So when we're doing that, we're not only shedding, like, physically, but emotionally and mentally and spiritually. We are also cleansing ourselves as women. We're cleansing our bodies. We're cleansing all aspects of everything that kind of transpired in our life the month before. So giving space to that, and that's why back in the day, like, they used to hold space for women, and talking about periods and menstruation wasn't super taboo. It was just kind of a way of life. You spoke about it with women, you spoke about it with men, with young boys, with young girls, and it was nothing that was super out of, like, oh my God, ew, like, yuck, like what society has made it now. And, because there's a lot of power in it, which, tends to happen as themes. When there's power in things, they tend to be shamed or casted out, shunned, in different ways, shapes, and forms. So bringing light to that when it comes to the moon and how women operate on a 28-day cycle as men work with the sun. And I'm speaking on very, like, general terms, as far as then there's also the ones in between that kind of operate kind of different, but majority just depending on what body you kind of came into this world with is usually what you're kind of syncing up with in that way. And then for the full moon, it's said that we were set to ovulate because we didn't have lights back in the day, right? So the full moon was that much more of a chance that you would see somebody at night and like pick your mate, procreate, and create babies, right? So on a very primal level, it's really interesting how we work with nature and how we are nature just as much as nature is us. And how far we've kind of came from that, which is kind of sad, but also, relearning, remembering this knowledge and applying it to our lives is really important, and passing down these teachings and becoming aware of, or getting curious, getting inquisitive, like, why is it that, uh, I feel like super connected to the moon. Like, I know for me, like, I'm a Cancer, right? So like my whole life I've just been obsessed with the moon. Like, I've just been in awe with the moon. I don't know if it's not only because I'm a Cancer, I'm a woman, I just love the moon. I just always did. I used to think that the moon used to follow me. I remember going to soccer practice like kind of early um, during the day, like when I was really little, on the weekends. And I remember the moon still being out while the sun was out. And I was like, this moon is following me. Like, I really felt like it was really following me personally. It was pretty funny, pretty cute, very innocent, and I love that for me, and for little me, and that it's just so interesting how our relation to things, and then we find out in the future, like, oh, this makes so much sense why I was connected to it. Like, this makes so much sense why I gravitate towards this thing. So let's talk about the moon in other perspectives, right? I have this tattoo on my hand. It's the sun and the moon, and it's really the moon tarot card. So it's 18 in Roman numericals, and it's all about removing illusion. So when you think about the moon, the energy of it is going to be like kind of like the high priestess. If you're familiar with tarot, it's going to be that bridge between the spirit realm and the earth realm. It's going to be our intuition. It's going to be the revealer, and sometimes the revealer of truth is like a really intense thing to be, right? Because when you look at the moon, it reflects the light of the sun depending on the placement that it is. So when the new moon is happening, the moon is still there and it's existing and it's in orbit and it's still working with the tides and working with the energy and working with, the gravitational force and keeping our Earth's gravity in place in the way that it does. But we don't see it, but it's still working. But the only time we see it is when it's reflecting something. So I feel like people that resonate with the moon are like really like give off that moon energy, if they have it predominantly in their chart, or it's just something that's, they really resonate with. It's like you kind of notice that about yourself. Like, you won't be seen unless you're reflecting something that's around you, right? And then you have the sun, which is the center of the universe, this very like boisterous energy, this very, literal burning star of fire, right? And then the moon is this like cold, shell of a thing that we still don't understand. People think it's a hologram. People think it's hollow. People think all different things, So we don't really know. The moon is a mystery. We kind of understand the sun. It's like a bowl of gas that's burning humongously and keeping things warm and, making things hot. And the closer you get to the sun, the hotter it gets. So, like, we have more of an understanding scientifically on the sun. So then energetically, we can kind of understand it a little bit more as well, because we're kind of, it's less mystery surrounding it. With the moon, we really don't know what the fuck is going on fully. So it's like when we're taking that time, there's just that illusion, that mystery. So then you have to trust. Like, you have to trust what you don't see. You have to trust what you can't tangibly measure. And that's the thing about the moon. That's the thing about surrendering, to the unknown. Um, there are certain things that are going to come to light that we don't necessarily want to or feel we can handle, but we can. If it's being revealed, we can, and we have to trust that and trust spirit in that way, that we can handle and manage the things that come up for us when they do, and just pray, pray to creator, pray to the moon, pray to the sun, to the stars, to wherever you feel you are resonant to pray with, and whatever you feel is speaking to you, pray to yourself. And yeah, so that moon energy, there's so many different things that affect us, like physiologically, psychologically, spiritually. There's so many things that are happening with the moon, and like we're just living life, like, and majority of people like don't even consider that into like the everyday of like, not that you need to put all of your focus into it and completely, hyperfixate or just only carve out space, like, oh well, the moon's going like this, like, but it's good to know, because when you could be like, oh, like maybe you could have a moment to tune into your emotions a little bit more, like, oh, if it's a full moon, maybe I'm gonna want to go out, maybe I'm going to want to, and then if I go out, I might be more prone to like certain undesirable situations, or maybe certain desirable situations. Depends on the person, depends on the mood, depends on what is conjuncting your moon or what is happening astrologically for you. But the best indication of that, before you tap into your chart, before you tap into all of these things, is to just simply ask yourself, like, how am I feeling? Like, what's coming up for me? Do I feel okay about that? Should I stay home? Should I kind of stay with myself and my own energy, or should I kind of like go out and socialize? Like, I've felt both feelings and ones in between during any moon cycle. I personally tend to, like, if my moon itself, like, meaning my cycle, like if my cycle is synced up where I'm new moon, and then like full moon, like the olden ways of like the natural cycle to kind of creation, in that way, I feel like I'm definitely more outgoing to like go out, and to I'm more prone to be like, oh, I want to go out this weekend, or I want to do this, do you want to go to the movies or whatever, during a full moon, if that's the time that I'm ovulating. Like, it's just crazy. It's like on a physiological way, it's like that's just what your body wants to go do. It doesn't mean that you're gonna go out and like create a baby. It just means that your body's like, yo, let's go out, I want to be seen, like I'm trying to be seen, and that's okay. Like, you learn the cues, and you can do that in a safe manner, you can do that in a good way. And then also taking heed when you feel like, I feel like I need to reserve my energy for myself. I feel like I need to kind of like, because the thing is, as women, when we are on our moons, like, we're a literal portal. It's almost like we're a vortex, like we're a black hole, and like we can kind of suck everything up, and like we're like a sponge. So you got to be mindful of what you're around, because you don't want to suck everything up. You want to leave things as they are. Like, that has nothing to do with you, So if you're putting yourself in certain places and situations, you could be taking that stuff home and taking that stuff into you and digesting it. And you don't want to digest some stuff. Like, it's not for you to even chew on, So don't even like start the process by consuming it. So, and I'm sure that there are, not to say that people that are born as men don't have access to that, because the more we tune into our emotions, the more we tune into the universe, the world, nature, our surroundings, the more, I can't speak for that because I don't have an experience as a man. So I can't speak for how the connection is. I can only speak for myself and my own personal experience. But I do know plenty of men that do tune into the moon in a really good way, and like have their own experience and stories that they tell, that she tells them, because that's the thing, is like, when you spend enough time looking at the moon, respecting the moon, inquiring about her, she's like, oh, okay, I'll show you a little bit since you're here, like, you respected me. Like, how about, you want to know about this? Like, I feel like her energy is just like really cool. Like, I just appreciate it. And, she might not get the best rep because, once again, like, I feel like the moon gets romanticized but not accepted for what she is in a lot of things. And that could be me personifying her in the way that I relate to her very well. But at the same token, I feel that the moon gets looked at as like, oh my God, this beautiful, glowy, mysterious thing that is constantly changing in phase and things like that. But like when people look at people that are constantly changing in phase, it's like more problematic. It's like, well, if someone's constantly in flux, then that's not stable. So I don't feel comfortable. And like that can get kind of a bad rep. So people will romanticize the ideology of something or people or humanity or the moon or whatever the case is, that whatever is embodying that energy and carrying that out. Because that could be anyone. That doesn't have to be solely women just because we are on a 28-day cycle. Like innately women are going to be that way. That is just innate. But anybody can have access to being that way, especially when you're just tuning into that energy, right? We all have access to it. And it's up to us to, kind of turn the valve in how much or how less we want to allow that flow into our space, because also then what is the opposite of that? That's order. That's action, The moon is innately in action. It just is. It's just going, it's going with the gravitational flow and pull. That's its action is surrender. Its action is inaction. And listening and receiving and responding, right? And then the sun is the opposite. It's the action, it's the, I have to do this. This is what needs to be done. Like, I don't have time to contemplate that, Moon is contemplation. Sun is like, all right, get shit done. Point blank, period. And neither is more important than the other. They're both absolutely needed in order to create the universe in which we live in, to create the earth in which we live in, because without the moon, we don't know what our earth would be like or if we could even live here. And without the sun, we know we can't, So it's just equally important moving pieces that are needed. And it's interesting, it's just interesting how things can seemingly be romanticized when they're suiting what gives a twinkle in our eye. And then when harsh truths come up or we have to face parts of ourselves that we have kind of suppressed or left dormant or, don't necessarily feel the most comfortable with, that it could kind of ignite this sense of uncomfortability, which could usually ignite a sense of defensiveness. And then, whether it's shutting down or pushing away, like there's a lot of a push and pull, with that moon energy, even with ourselves in it. It doesn't just, this doesn't, what my statement that I'm saying doesn't have to solely be coordinated. That's not the right word, but y'all know what I mean. Just like, it doesn't have to be looked at as just from person to person. It could be from you to yourself, like, and your aspect of the moon within you, right? Like, so there's certain times that you might be like, you lying, that's not true, that's not a reality, like, that is real, for you, but okay. And like when you have that, it's like that honest conversation with yourself. That could be uncomfortable. You could be like, what the fuck is that? I don't want to talk about that. Like, why are we talking about that? Like, who said we should talk about that right now? And you can villainize that part of yourself that also wants to go there. But I think it's important that, like, we come up for some air, because, sometimes it's completely consuming to be submerged in the subconscious, to trying to understand things that we just might not ever understand. Like, we can understand to the best of our abilities ourselves and the way our subconscious works. We could study it in books. We could do all that. But at the end of the day, like, we still don't know. It's a mystery. It's a mystery the way our brain works inside of our head, And although there's so much science and there's a lot of coordination, like, the best teacher for ourselves is to literally observe ourselves and to witness ourselves in moments and times and places and spaces that invoke different reactions, and trying to understand why, but not getting consumed by the why. It's a very fine line. And I think that that's all surrounded by moon energy. You know, it's that driving force. You know, some can call it divine feminine. You know, and call the sun or whatever other action oriented divine masculine. You know, it's just, or it's just, there's so many terms you can call it, the yin, the yang, right? The moon would be the yin. The moon is the darkness with the drop of light in it. Like, even the yin side looks like a moon because the white dot is the moon in its full place. But then you could also say that inverse it is the new moon. So it could be however you see it, or however it's in, however you take it, however you process it. But there's always going to be a polarity, and the moon is the polarity. And sometimes we look at these aspects of, what we can see and tangibly understand more so as like a greater than. And I think it's just really important to remember that it's equal, just like man and woman, like we're equal, and everybody in between, like we are equal. We're important in so many ways, and we exist in the reality that we exist, although fucked like we exist, in this reality, because we have one another. We've gotten this far in our evolution, and on a more positive note because of one another. So it's the same thing. There's just like the cosmology, the stories of the stars, the stories of the planets, of the sun, of the moon. It's like just like the romantic story of the pieces of ourselves. And you can look at that within religions. You could look at that within the gods and all these different things, that all these different stories that you hear that can get passed down in really whatever walk of life that you come from. There's just certain times where things are more potent and certain times where you should avoid things. And I strongly, strongly encourage you to kind of like communicate with the moon on that. Like, the full moon's all about letting things go. The new moon's all about calling things in. But if it's during an eclipse season, you might not want to do that. It might just be getting clear on what you want. I see in the mainstream media, a lot of things are talking about manifesting. But why are we working on manifesting when we don't even know how to let things go? Now that's just like energetic hoarding, So I think it's really important that we learn from ourselves, not just solely on TikTok. And if you hear something, not to completely exclude anything on social media. If something resonates for you, I encourage you to do more research. Maybe ask somebody in your community that you might know a little bit about that, talk to an actual person. You can look up definitions all day, but it will never hit, the stories will never resonate to the degree or the caliber of if you're speaking human to human with somebody, and they're not only sharing their knowledge and their experience, but they're passing down these teachings. And it's kind of like a key. It's kind of like an energetic, like, it's like a stone that they're passing to you, and like it just carries more weight. It's physical, and it in the sense of like you're hearing the words, you're forming a memory with somebody. So it's like activating things. You're hearing people speak, and that whenever you're listening to anyone speak, even those who are listening to me speak now, like this is something you're consuming in the moment. So I encourage you to be very mindful of what content you're consuming and like what their intentions are when they're speaking. I could tell you my intention of when I'm speaking, not only for this particular podcast, but for every podcast that I do, any space that I open up, I'm very intentional with. And I pray before to just be the vehicle of whatever needs to be said, and also to just bring forth whoever needs to hear whatever is being said. So, validating ourselves, knowing that you're not alone, validating myself, knowing that I'm not alone, like taking my own advice, holding myself accountable, as well as, bringing consistency, and ultimately just creating a safe space for us to exist and kind of just learn about who we are and why we do the things that we do, learn to relinquish shame, and encourage one another to just continue to be ourselves, because as much as we are ourselves, then we can't miss out on anything, you know. If you are yourself, then no matter what you do, like you're not gonna miss out on the person that you love. You're not going to, miss anything. You're not going to miss the job opportunity, the place you're supposed to go, the trip you're supposed to take. The more you're peeling back the layers to expose you, the more you are encouraging the universe to treat you like you. And it's like, why would we want to be treated like anyone else when we were born ourselves? And it's like, why I say that very like sensitively, like, and generally, like, of course, why is because we've been spoon fed to think and want to be like everybody else because of the way celebrities are set up, and society and power dynamics are set up. Like, it's like, well, why be like yourself if you could be like this great person? It's okay to admire people, but like once we step into worshiping, that's a whole other thing, and that's a whole other episode, and we'll get into that for sure at some point. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of come on here and touch base on the moon and just give her a little bit of space. She's been such a healing energy for me my entire life. I've always found solace in the moon. I've always found myself in the moon. And I've lost myself in the moon. So, there's that quote that's like, be careful when you stare into the abyss because you may become it, something along the lines of that. I don't remember it word for word. I used to want to get it tattooed so bad from like the age of like 15 to like 19. I'm like, I'm getting this. And this is the lettering. I'm getting it. I remember it's like Behem script, but I digress. It's interesting, to stay with yourself throughout those different moods, those different phases. We look at phases when people are like, oh, you're going through a phase. Like, I know me, I get instantly defensive. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are you trying to say by that? Because usually there's kind of an aspect of like condescension attached to that. Like, you're not going to stay like this long, but like they don't know that. Like, people who are speaking a definitive statement on something that's in your reality is kind of like, it's kind of ignorant and arrogant in that moment. Might not be the intention, but it's like it could feel very like a hit. Like, what do you mean? Like, what if that's something you're working on to kind of implement that you want to center in your life, more and more. So I can kind of put people on the defense. And like I said, I'm a Cancer, I be in my defensive. I know myself. I'm aware of it. But I'm learning and I'm identifying with it and allowing it to come into pass. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but I'm going to keep it rolling. Just, it's important to have agency, to have security within yourself, even if you are going through a phase, even if it is a stage, even if it is a moment and it's going to be different, like probably is, because everything is. So it's okay if you feel a way if somebody says it to you like that, because it could very well be a kind of like a backhanded compliment in a way. So yeah, like that's real. Like you're very the space is there for you to feel what that feels like, but not to get lost in it, and then to also take everything everyone says with a grain of salt, even yourself at times, because identifying what voice it's coming from and where that voice and what that voice is rooted in tension is big too. So yeah, that's moon, and that's me talking about it. If y'all have any questions on the moon or anything that you want to get into, feel free to comment. Not only now live, but at any point, the messages are always open, and that goes for anybody at any place at any point in the world. If you go on the link tree at Duality, I believe it's just Duality, not Duality Podcast. If you go into there's questions you could leave anonymously, and you can like write whether you want it to be on the podcast, or if you want to just like, have that question back and forth, just leave like some kind of way that I can respond back, or I can just answer it somewhere. And if you want to remain anonymous. So just know that that's available for everyone in any spectrum, in any space, whether I know you, I don't know you, I used to know you, doesn't matter. It's open, because that's what all of this is about. And this safe space is to create them, even when we're in unsafe spaces, and learn how to navigate them. And getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is like the moon's motto. So it's also all about listening to ourselves and trusting our intuition. And that can look like identifying that people around us aren't trustworthy or don't encourage that part of ourselves to come out, and that can be a harsh reality, and that can make us evade the moon, or that can make us evade the sun, because then we don't want to put action into whatever it is that we became aware of. So I think it's important that we get our sunlight and then we get our moonlight, that we sit with ourselves and we go in community. Just like everything else on the show, it's about balance. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to just pull one card for the month of July. And I just wanted to put a message in this podcast in particular. I want to let you guys know that I'm going to be gone for a week, maybe 2. I might be gone for 2 weeks. So tentatively 2 weeks, but definitely 1 week. And in that time that I'm away, I just want to speak encouragement into myself. And remind myself that when I play back this podcast, and for anybody else who needs the reminder, because it's not only just me, anybody who needs this reminder, like, that you got this. I trust you. I love you. It's worth it. Don't give up. Listen to yourself. Make the space. It's okay. You're safe. And I look forward to seeing another layer, another peel kind of come down, and another layer be exposed. I'm excited to see what that looks like for you. And I'm on your team. And so that's what I want to say to myself. And if anyone else needed to hear that for themselves, maybe you needed to hear that, being encouraged by somebody else, and then maybe it might also feel good to say those same kind of affirmations or thoughts or words to yourself, and maybe saying that to you in the mirror, and giving yourself the space to kind of time capsule it. So, good morning, Gina. Thank you for tuning in. So I want to, what's been your experience when speaking to the moon? Okay, cool. I didn't realize we had some comments. So my experience when speaking to the moon is always a different thing. It really depends. I've spoken to the moon out of like sheer desperation. I've spoken to the moon as a child, just being like, hi, I've spoken to the moon being like, hey, can you please remove this from my reality, because it's really, really hurting me, Or like, hey, can we like encourage this behavior, because I really would like to activate it within myself. And for me, it's not like I'm hearing the moon. Like, it's not like I'm speaking to the moon and then the moon's like, you're like, words. It's more like feelings, right? Sensations, maybe even like clairvoyance, just like knowing, like or clairsentience, just the knowing, and just also seeing things in my mind, feeling how I feel. If like I talk to the moon, I tend to look up at the moon, and then I'll close my eyes and kind of put my hand on my heart and hand on my belly, and just lean into it, And when I'm closing my eyes, I might see different things and different images. I might have memories come up. And rather than trying to like Spider-Man attach to them, I just allow whatever is supposed to come up and stay and settle, and whatever's supposed to fall away. And because like when a whole memory comes up, there might just be like the fact that I was standing up for myself might be the actual point, right? Rather than who I was standing up to myself to, where I was, what I was wearing. I don't need all the details. Sometimes it's just like I was standing up for myself. We want to do more of that, you know? So when I talk to the moon, I'm talking to that part of myself. And in my experience, it's just really important to pay attention to how I'm responding when I'm speaking, and to not abandon myself because I may not be getting the instant gratification of an actual conversation like with a human. Thank you for asking that question, and thank you for being here and for sending your comments. Is there any more comments? Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and whoever had words to share and whoever didn't and was just listening, or whoever will. I appreciate it. And yeah, so for whoever is open to it, I'm going to pull a card for the month of July. What is it that we should be focused on? Or what is being unlocked for us in the month of July? This is a great one. We love this. New vitality. So new energy. So interesting. Spiritually, this is like in the traditional tarot, this would be the Ace of Wands, right? Or it would be the Ace of Wands. And it's all about our passions being ignited. It's all about, let's steer away from the definition and let's tune into the energy at hand. So what's coming up for the month of July is essentially this replenishment, this new vitality, this energy that we've been kind of praying for, is being unlocked within a lot of us that have been making the space for it, right? And even I believe if you haven't consciously been making the space, you're still going to feel a push to make this space to then have it. So it's not like you're going to miss the wave. I mean, if July comes and goes and you haven't made the space, maybe, but like know that once you're feeling that, it's going to feel almost like a push on the back of your shoulder blades, where it's like all of a sudden you're believing in yourself a little bit more, like your words hold weight a little more. The things that you're passionate about, you can kind of see coming to fruition and manifesting, being created in reality. It's a sensation overall of like, I got this and I got me. And that's a beautiful place to be. That's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. So I want to thank the energies in advance for that are kind of setting ourselves up in July. And all of the energies that are remaining in June that are taking us there, and that we kind of get the chance to dance around with in the meantime. And although that could look like stepping on each other's feet or missing a step or two, it's still dancing. So learning to surrender to that and to the rhythm, and rather than being in our brains and wondering how we salsa or do any particular dance, just allowing our bodies to sink in with the rhythm, because we will ultimately move in the place that we are meant to. So yeah, that's the message. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being you. Looking forward to speaking again. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it might look a little different. So stay tuned. Talk soon. Bye.